Hello, I'm Professor Ricky with Income School, and today on Ask the Professor, we will be talking about the GDPR. Today's question on Ask the Professor comes from, well, many of you, about the GDPR. What is the GDPR and what does it mean for you and your website? Well, today we're going to cover as much of that as we can, but here's the thing. I'm a professor, I'm not your lawyer, so nothing that I say today should be construed as legal advice. If after this video you're still kept awake at night worrying about the GDPR, then I highly encourage you to consult a lawyer who has read and understands the entire GDPR. Good luck. Let's start by talking about what the GDPR is. G-D-P, oh, that's an R. So first, what is the GDPR? The GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a not exactly new piece of legislation that was passed in the European Union that regulates how we're able to collect, process, and use people's personally identifiable information. Now, personally identifiable information, that's things like their name, their email address, and even their IP address. That apparently in the EU is considered personally identifiable. Now, this law was not passed just to be a royal pain in our tuchuses, but the fact of the matter is that's exactly what it is. You see, you may be thinking that the GDPR doesn't apply to you if you don't live in the EU. But the fact is that even if the users on your website are just in the EU at the time that they use the website, any of those users, then this law applies to you and you need to comply. It's probably a lot simpler than you think, especially if what you have is a simple WordPress website that you use for internet marketing the way that we teach here on Income School. You see, if you get it wrong, you could be subject to a fine of 20 million euros or 4% of your annual revenue, whichever is bigger. But that's just the worst case scenario, and these are the numbers they're using to try to scare us to death. Chances are, even if they did come after you, they wouldn't come after you with this. Because the fact is that the GDPR is a piece of legislation that was designed to target large companies that are using large amounts of our information, our personal data, gathering it, storing it, using it for marketing and who knows what else, and who are doing so without our express permission. So you and your WordPress website are not really the target, but you do need to comply. So let's talk about the places where you may be collecting, processing, and deleting people's personally identifiable information. The first place you're likely gathering and storing people's personally identifiable information is in the comments section of your website, or if you have any memberships. When people submit a comment to your website, they usually have to provide their email address. This pulls their Gravatar image if they have one and allows you to identify who they are. It's great, right? Except that because you're grabbing their email address and potentially even their name for their comment, this is personally identifiable information. Now what you're going to need to do is get people's permission to do that. Now WordPress is coming through for us. This could have been pretty complicated. In addition to getting people's consent to collect that information, you also have to give people a way to find out what information you've stored on them, as well as have the ability to delete that information from your entire website. Well, that would have been complicated, but WordPress came through. Update 4.9.6 for WordPress gives us the ability to do this. You're going to want to have some sort of explanation for how you use this information in your privacy policy, on comments specifically, and you're going to need to link to your privacy policy from the comment form. In addition, WordPress now has a tool where you're going to be able to, when requested, send people the information that you've gathered on them, as well as delete that information if they ask you to. There's going to be a couple ways to handle this, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. I also lumped memberships into this section. You see, WordPress integrates with a lot of aftermarket and premium plugins like LearnDash and MemberPress that are made for membership sites or course websites. Now, when somebody signs up for a course or a membership on your website, they've provided you personally identifiable information. Now, these plugins, all the smart ones at least, they know that if they don't get GDPR compliant, they're going to be in trouble and you're going to be looking for a new provider. So they are working on integrating with WordPress. So when people request that information that I just told you about and WordPress does an extract for you, well, it's going to extract all that information as well and be able to pass that on to the person requesting it and delete it if asked. The second place you may be collecting personally identifiable information is through a sales checkout. Now, if you're using a third-party tool like Sendowl, it's actually them collecting the information and you're probably okay. They should be GDPR compliant. Now, again, anytime you collect somebody's personally identifiable information, like when you're selling them a product, info product or physical product, you're going to want to link to your privacy policy so that people can find how you collect and store and use their information. The third place that you're probably collecting personally identifiable information on your website is for your Google Analytics. You have placed a tracking code on your website, if you're using Google Analytics, that's collecting the information about how people use your website. It's doing this by collecting their IP address, as well as gathering any other information about them that they can based upon their Google login or whatever. And Google, therefore, is able to give you demographic information, where they're from, all sorts of information about how much time they spend on your site, where they go. It's great data for us to have as website builders, but it does include personally identifiable information. Now, because of that, Google's gotten smart. See, Google knows what they're doing, and Google has the biggest skin in the game when it comes to making sure that they're GDPR compliant. So Google is working on creating all the right tools to help you identify or to extract that personally identifiable information like we talked about WordPress doing. And they're also making sure that everything they do is GDPR compliant. They're going to be anonymizing IP addresses and all sorts of things to make sure the information they collect is not personally identifiable. And if it is, that they're following the laws and making sure that you on your website are compliant with the GDPR. The fourth and final place that most of us are collecting personally identifiable information is for our email list. Now, this one could get a little bit hairy if you're not careful, because a lot of people, what they're doing is using some sort of lead magnet or a freebie, something that they're giving away for free for people that will just provide their email address. The problem is when people provide their email address for the freebie, they're not giving explicit permission for you to send them follow-up emails, like a newsletter or other marketing emails. And because they haven't given that explicit, express permission for you to use their email in that way, if you send them another email, you are not complying with the GDPR. This is the one that could take some work. If that's how you collected emails, then for everybody based in the EU, what you're going to have to do is get their permission to keep sending them emails, or just wipe them off your email list. Now, if you're watching this before the GDPR starts being enforced on May 25th, 2018, then you've got a little bit of time. You could send out an email to everybody that's in the EU, or for who you don't have a location, giving them a link to sign up for a new email list. And then you just have to pitch to them the reasons why they want to be on your newsletter. Now, there are a few ways to do that. One is on your opt-in form, where you're going to give them the freebie once they give you their email address. You can have a checkbox or have them answer yes or no on whether or not they give you permission to send follow-up marketing and newsletter emails. That by default has to be selected no or an unchecked box. The other thing about that, though, is they have to still be able to get the freebie even if they don't check the box. You just can't have them on your email list. That could be frustrating, right? So another way to do this is to have the consent to be on the email list somewhere else in that chain of where they sign up for your freebie. You could have them give their email address and sign up for the freebie, and you're going to send them the freebie one way or another, but then maybe it takes them to another page where they can consent to sign up for your email list. Now, all those are perfectly fine approaches, but that's not the approach that I'm taking. The approach that I've chosen to take with my websites where I have an email list is actually on the sign up page, I have them signing up for a newsletter. Now, there may be a promise of freebies in the email newsletter. For example, we often will do that. We'll have a giveaway, something that they're going to get for free as part of the newsletter. And so what I do is I tell them everything that they're going to get on that page. I say, you're going to get our regular newsletter, you're going to get this, you're going to get that, and in the very first email, you're going to get this specific freebie. By doing it that way, when they give me their email address, they've already given me express permission to put them on the newsletter because that's what they signed up for. Now, I told you WordPress was doing a really big favor for us. Update 4.9.6 is the one to watch out for. If you haven't already got it on your website, make sure that you put it on there right away, because 4.9.6 makes WordPress GDPR compliant. It gives you a template with a whole bunch of legal language for your privacy policy. Now, WordPress has made this easy. They give you a really nice template for how to do that. And if you have a privacy policy, linking from your footer is perfectly fine. But that's not going to be enough to satisfy GDPR. What you're going to have to do is, in addition to putting it in the header, or rather the footer menu, rather than putting it just in the footer menu, you're going to have to put it all over your website, anywhere where you collect user information. If this information was helpful to you, or maybe just entertaining, please click the subscribe button below. And if you're really serious about getting started building your own websites and generating a passive income online, go check out Project 24, which is our complete program teaching you step-by-step how to build a website, create awesome content, and replace a full-time income in about 24 months. See you next time. Class dismissed.